It was a Friday night at the City Lights dance hall, and I was already busy behind the bar. 3 little co-eds from St. Catherine's were seated at one end and were trying to make my life even more complicated. They weren't being bad customers, in fact. Only the tall brunette was actually a customer. The other 2 were underage, or at least I'd bet my license on it. Still, I kept feeding the drinks to Bernadette, the brunette, and turned a blind eye to whoever she passed them off to. Let's face it, having 3 hot college co-eds partying in your bar was always good for business. I looked back over at them. Okay, having 2 hot co-eds and the other one, Grace, being kinda pretty but extremely well endowed was good for business. How were they making my life difficult? Simple. It was their non-stop flirting. It was very distracting, especially the pretty bubble-headed blonde named Lacey. I realized they were just practicing, getting ready for the deluge of guys that would be here within the hour. Being located right across the street from the battery plant made it easy to tell when the second shift clocked out. Even with the early crowd and the added distractions from Lacey, I knew instantly when she walked in. It's hard to forget someone you'd planned to spend the rest of your life with, the one you'd fallen head over heels for and married. It's also hard not to remember they tore out your heart and stole your little girl. Yeah, those are the people you never forget. She walked down to the opposite end of the bar and took a seat away from the little gaggle of co-eds. She was still attractive even though she looked like she'd been ridden hard and put away wet. She wore a little crop top under a sheer blouse and jeans. It showed off her trim body and a small tattoo on her abs, which was new. At least it was to me. Other than the concerned look on her face, she appeared to be ready for a night of dancing and fun. I wondered instantly if she was going to bring her date here. Surely she ain't that stupid. I quickly reined in my anger. It had gotten me into more trouble than I cared to remember. Taking a breath, I noticed she'd changed her hairstyle again. She was growing it long, closer to the way it had been when we were first married. Gone was the short, spiky hair, the style she'd worn for him. I'll admit I was curious. I hadn't talked to my ex-wife, Connie, but a handful of times in the last 3 years. It had been 16 months since I'd even seen her or my daughter, Susie. My thoughts were pulled back to the present by a syrupy, sweet voice. "Oh, TJ," the pretty young blonde sang out. Yeah, Lacey, what do you need?" Other than having a certain cute bartender show me a good time tonight? Bernadette and Grace giggled. "Lacey," I said, giving her my undivided attention. "You know, Maury isn't here yet." The stunned look on her face spawned an outburst of laughter from her friends. I grinned at the thought of her with my closing bartender. Maury was a 5 8" 150-pound banty rooster of a cowboy in his early 50s. He really was a cowboy since he ranched during the day and then tended bar most nights. My grin turned into a smile as I watched her discomfort. Apparently, that wasn't the bartender she'd meant. I saw the joy drain out of her face as she began to get embarrassed. "Come on, Lace," I said, laying my country drawl on thick. "You know a night with you would ruin me for all other women." It was like flipping a switch as the life sprang back into her face. She flashed me a huge smile. "Don't I know it, but oh, what a night it would be," she said, trying to sound seductive. "Come on, Lace," Bernadette said, rolling her eyes. "Let's get a good table. TJ, would you send a waitress over?" "Sure thing, Bernie." Bernie and Grace began walking over to an empty table, but Lacey slid slowly down the bar until she was in front of me. She leaned forward, making sure her frilly blouse gaped open, exposing the deep valley of her 2 young, ample breasts as they tried to escape. She smiled and watched me take in the view. "You know, TJ," she said in her most sultry voice, "I really would make it memorable. I'd love to rock your world." "Thanks, Lace," I replied in my sincerest voice. "But my world is just beginning to settle back down, and unless you're ready for a long-term commitment, I'll have to pass for now." "Well, don't wait too long. My offer won't last forever." She slid back off the bar, smiled, and winked. I noticed she put a little extra swish in her gait as she hurried over to her friends. Another satisfied customer, I grinned to myself. I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Jacob Carlton. Jake, or TJ to most people. Texas Jake to those few who know me as some wannabe country singer. My two business partners and I own the City Lights Dance Hall and a club known as the Strobe down on the Brownwood Town Square. We also have a handful of sports bars down in the city. Not too bad for a 28-year-old country boy. Of course, I'm a minor partner, but I pretty much run the City Lights. Theodore Hawthorne, the main financial backer of the group, oversees the Strobe, while Martin Buck Caldwell, ex-State University football star, fronts the sports bars. I know Theodore Hawthorne just sounds like an English professor or writer, and what's funny is Theo looks the part. He's 40-ish with a bookworm appearance, but with his sharp business sense and the Hawthorne name and old money, he's the heart of our little partnership. I met Theo while I was tending bar at the Hawthorne Hotel. It wasn't much of a bar, mainly there to cater to the hotel guests. If the guests wanted a real bar, they'd go a few doors down to O'Malley's Irish Pub. If they wanted the club scene, they'd go over to the Strobe. Buck is a local celebrity and is the face of our group. He was the star running back for State University about 30 years ago. I don't think there's a person he hasn't met in this state. With Buck's name, Theo's money, and my newly found talent for day-to-day operations, we've been more than a little profitable these first 2 years. It's been one of the few bright spots in my life since my divorce 3 years ago. We initially connected with Buck through his nephew, who I spent time with while in the Johnson County Correctional Facility. His nephew Ricky was doing a little stint for drugs while the reason I was there was now sitting at the end of my bar. "What are you drinking, Connie?" I asked, trying to keep my disdain in check. "The usual, please," she replied meekly. "Sorry, fresh out of rat poison. How about some arsenic?" She paled slightly. I guess I don't hide my feelings very well. "A mojito, please." I nodded, made her drink, and put it in front of her. She took a sip and smiled weakly. "Extra mint, you remembered." "I remember a lot of things. Now what do you want?" "I need to talk with you. Could you spare a few minutes?" "Connie, I'm working," I replied. "It's important, Jake." Typical Connie, I thought. Always about what she felt was important. "You should have called," I said flatly. "Would you've answered?" "Probably not," I smirked, and then relented. "When my extra help arrives, I can take a short break." "Thank you," she said softly. I went back to the tending bar for the next half hour before Maury and my extra barmaid showed up. Connie led me over to a table. I'll admit, I was admiring the way she filled out her jeans and her tribal tramp stamp, another new addition. She scanned the place, and a gentle smile formed on her face. It was a face I would have once killed to wake up to. Now killed sounded pretty good. "How's the singing career going?" she said, ignoring my obvious glare. "Hanging by a thread. I still do several gigs a month, but just locally. I did talk to a guy here in town who's formed his own label. His name is Ron Beck, and he was pretty straight with me." "Does he think you can make it big?" she said, smiling warmly. I couldn't tell if she was actually interested or if she was just being sarcastic. I didn't care what she thought, so it didn't matter either way. "Yeah, he does. He said I was good enough, but so are 1,000 other guys. He told me to keep punching but keep my day job." She scanned the bar again and nodded. "Seems your day job is doing pretty well." "Yeah, things are starting to look up. Now, why the hell are you here?" I said, unable to hide my sneer. "I'm trying to right a wrong," she replied. I watched her closely, trying to determine if she was sincere or if this was just another attempt to screw with my life. I immediately realized if I could have told that, I wouldn't have been so blindsided when she left me. "Which wrong is that?" I said, tasting bile in the back of my throat. "The wrong of hooking up with an old boyfriend at your sister's bachelorette party? And flushing our 3-year marriage down the drain? Or was it cheating on me with that for the next year before you blindsided me with divorce papers? Or maybe it was baiting me into attacking him that night. I had to smirk at that painful memory. A brief moment of revenge followed by years of pain. She and Big Bad Brad, her ex-flame in high school, had ambushed me here after my shift at the battery plant. They knew I came here after work for a couple of drinks with my friends to unwind. While my divorce was going through, those few drinks usually turned into several. I was already pretty well lit by the time they arrived. The had started taunting me almost as soon as they got there. Later, I figured they were trying to get me to lose my temper and give them some ammunition to use in the divorce. I gave them a WMD. Bad Brad seemed to think of himself as some kind of bad and he was certainly much bigger and heavier than my 6-foot, 175-pound frame. I'm not sure if he was stupid or just arrogant, but he looked over at Connie while he was making some smart comment to me. I sucker punched him and then proceeded to kick his ass. Was it a fair fight? Hell no. Was it fair when he trashed my life behind my back? My ever-faithful, soon-to-be ex-wife jumped into the middle of it and got punched in the face. Did I feel guilty? Yeah, a little bit, but not enough to lose any sleep over it. I was alternating between kicking him in the balls and stomping on his face when some of my friends finally pulled me off him. The damage had been done. Ended up drinking his meals through a straw for the next couple of months, and Connie had a broken nose. I think their injuries played a big part in Judge Knox's sentencing. Even though he was sympathetic, I got 6 months for aggravated assault. While I was in county lockup, Connie pretty much got everything she wanted in the divorce. The only thing she wanted but didn't get was I still had parental rights to our daughter. When I got out, I got hit with 2 surprises. The first one wasn't really much of a surprise since it was a restraining order. The second one, though, almost put me over the edge. I was being accused of molesting my 4-year-old daughter. If the restraining order hadn't been there, I might have killed them. It took me months to legally wade through that bullshit, but by then they'd poisoned my little girl against me. When I finally got to see Susie, she screamed in terror and ran from me. I was now a monster. The lady from Child Protective Services didn't even bat an eye as they stripped the rest of my parental rights from me. That was the last time I saw either Susie or Connie. It took me another month to get the court to look deeper into those allegations. When they did, they determined she'd been coached. They hardly restored any of my parental rights, but they did effectively block Brad, now her new husband, from adopting Susie. I'd like to say it's been a nightmare, but with those you wake up. I had no choice but to start over, since I'd lost my wife and daughter, been fired, and now had a fresh felony record. I got on at the Hawthorne Hotel, tending bar by taking the worst shifts, but over these last 2 years, I'd finally begun to put my life back together. Now Broomhilda was here. "Which wrong were you hoping to right?" I said, trying to control myself. "Well, as many as possible," she said, staring at me with her pale green eyes, pleading. "But I was going to start with our daughter. She needs a good man in her life for a father." "What happened to Mr. Wonderful?" I asked. She looked down at her drink. "I would have thought you'd heard by now." I snorted. "Connie, I haven't heard shit about you or Susie in over a year. Those few friends I still have left after what you did to me knew never to mention your name to me." She sighed, and I thought I saw a tear in her eye. "Brad left me 6 months ago. He cleaned out all our accounts and took off with some other woman." I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean your bad boy lover cheated on you, treated you like and left you? Classic." "I know I deserve that." "No. What you deserve is to be burned at the stake with the other witches." "Jake, I'm sorry. I can't even begin to ask you to forgive me. What I did was so cruel. It makes me sick knowing I was a part of it." "So why were you then?" I asked. She looked at me confused. "Why were you a part of it?" I asked again. She dropped her head and became quickly fascinated with her glossy red fingernails. I continued. I never had a clue. I knew our marriage wasn't perfect, but I never knew you were so unhappy. Not until that last year. I wasn't, Jake, she said in a soft, broken voice. I wasn't that unhappy. Things were hard because of our finances, but I knew things would get better and I knew you were trying. My sister's bachelorette party was an escape for me from our everyday problems. I hadn't planned on ending up with Brad. It just happened. I snorted and started to say something, but she interrupted. I know that doesn't excuse it, but I really hadn't gone down there planning to cheat on you. After it happened, I knew you'd never forgive me, and Brad made me feel special. I was so torn and confused about that next year. I knew our marriage was over, but I couldn't let go of it. My guilt and mood swings brought out your anger, and between us, our home life was miserable. I grew more and more dependent on Brad for my happiness. Soon I knew I had to do whatever I could to ensure our happiness. That included finding a way for him, Susie, and me to be a family. Jake, I never wanted to hurt you any more than I knew I already had. It was Brad who needed you completely out of our lives. I'm ashamed I went along with it. I'd have never dreamed I could have been such a cold-hearted I'm so sorry, Jake. Well, at least that's something we can agree on, I answered. She looked at me puzzled. That you were a cold-hearted She recoiled slightly at my anger and grew silent. This was a mistake coming here, she finally whispered. You think? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. All right, Connie, you're here. You said something about Susie and her needing a father. What did you mean? She looked around the dance hall as she spoke, refusing to even look at me. With Brad leaving us broke, Susie and I ended up moving in with Mom. My sister and her husband had moved out to California. Now Mom has moved to Arizona. She met some guy online and took off. The rent is paid up through the end of this month, but I can't afford it by myself. She ducked her head again and stared at her drink. Jake, there's nothing to keep me here. I can get another job doing bookkeeping work just about anywhere, but it barely pays the bills. I've got family back in Philadelphia. I contacted them and they could use me to help with one of the family businesses. They've also got a place for Susie and me to live. So you'll be taking my daughter to Philadelphia? I asked coldly. Yes, she said weakly and then slowly looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading as they filled with tears. I'm living in a hole of a life here, Jake. I've got no reason to stay, unless you can give me one. I fought the urge to rip into her and remind her it was her own damn fault. But the thing I fought hardest against was not to allow my hope to grow. What my bitch of an ex-wife was dangling in front of me had been my greatest hope these past few years. So what are you saying, Connie? That you now want me to be a part of my daughter's life? Does she know this? The last time I saw her, she was terrified of me. I can start working on that, Jake. It will take a little time, but I'm sure she'll come around. The fact she hadn't done anything to repair that relationship already wasn't lost on me. I might be a little slow at times, but if you want, I suggested calmly, I can send a letter that you could read to her. I think it would only confuse her right now. Maybe when she's older? Jake? There's a condition, she said nervously. Okay, here it comes. Susie and I are a package deal. Ah, the piece of dog in the birthday cake? I'll admit I was stunned. My first thoughts were not nice. I wondered if she was on drugs or if Brad had beaten her since she obviously wasn't all there mentally. I couldn't imagine how she would even dream I would take her back after what she'd put me through. Thankfully, I was able to reply without gagging. And just what does that mean? I asked. She turned away and couldn't face me again. I felt a relief that she at least had some sense of guilt at what she was proposing. It would mean you and I would have to work on having some kind of relationship. We had a relationship. It wasn't enough for you. The relationship we have now is pretty simple. You tried to destroy me, and now I hate you." "I know," she said sadly. "And I don't blame you, but—" There's always a but, isn't there? I think life is an ass, man. It seems to love buts. I can't expose Susie to that kind of relationship. Jake, you'd have to allow me to try and make up for some of the hell I've put you through. "So how do you plan on doing that?" I asked. I'd hoped we could start by being civil and actually be nice to each other. After that, we could work on becoming friends, and then after that— "You've got to be shitting me," I said quietly, as I tried to keep my jaw from falling on the table. "Look, Jake, I know I've hurt you. I've ruined the one thing that I now want more than anything. I want our family back. I'm not stupid. I know it will take a long time, maybe even a lifetime to make it up to you, but I'm willing to try. Would you please just consider it? So would you be willing to give me back my visitation rights?" Her pause gave me all the answers I needed. I took a deep breath as my hatred for this began to boil over. She watched me, and I saw fear in her eyes for the first time since I'd beat the shit out of Brad. My feelings were probably written all over my face. So let me get this straight. In order to even see my daughter, I have to allow you back into my life. The more I expose my throat and heart to you, the more you might allow me into Susie's life. I get to see my daughter only when you're there, and that's assuming you can even get her to speak to me again. And if, by some miracle, we somehow become a real father and daughter again, you can still just take her away from me if you're having a bad day. Of course, if you ever find another Brad, you'll both be gone overnight and I'm out of luck. I glared at her, waiting for some kind of answer. She stared back at me with tears starting to run down her face. "I know you don't trust me, but I promise I won't do that to you. I know what I've lost. I just need a chance to try to win some of it back. You're right, Connie. I don't trust you to do anything but what's good for your selfish ass. You made those same promises when we got married, but it didn't keep your legs from springing apart for Brad, did it? Damn! Now you're pimping out your own daughter, so I'll take you back? That's pathetic even for you. Jake, I'm sorry, but I'm desperate," she cried out loud, enough that I could feel the eyes of some of the people around us staring. "I can't lose Susie," she quietly sobbed. "She's all I got now." I was trying to get my head around this, fighting a sick feeling that if I couldn't come up with some kind of solution, then I wouldn't get to see my daughter again, at least not until she was 18. The problem was there wasn't an answer. Connie had made it clear it was an all-or-nothing offer, and even the all part was subject to change. I knew I couldn't live like that, waiting for her to tear Susie away from me on a whim. It wouldn't be fair to Susie or me. But to end any hope was killing me. Sometimes God or fate or whatever you believe in smiles on you. It's like some decision was made, that in the middle of a string of bad days, this day was going to be a good one. For me, it started with a little girl's voice ringing out across the bar. Uncle TJ. Izzy, a pretty little 6-year-old girl with long black hair, came skipping over to us. She was trailed by her 4-year-old brother, a husky butterball of a boy who stomped across the barroom floor in his new cowboy boots. I got to my feet just in time to catch the little girl as she launched herself into my arms. Her squeal pierced the country music that filled the hall. I heard several laughs from some of the surrounding tables. There's something about a child's laughter that's contagious, and I felt myself laughing with her. I felt something bumping into my leg and looked down. Her little brother, Gabe, was ramming his head into my leg, grimacing and snorting. Apparently, he thought he was a bull today. Putting his sister down, I picked up the baby bull and tickled him. He burst out laughing, and I put him back down. As soon as his boots hit the floor, he was back in bull mode. "So where's your mama?" "She's over there with Uncle Maury," Izzy chirped. I looked over and saw her. Her tanned skin, high cheekbones, and long, straight ebony hair gave notice of her Native American heritage. She had a swimmer's body, lean and athletic. I grinned as I marveled at the way her tight butt and muscular thighs filled out her jeans. but it was her dark, piercing eyes that grabbed me. As they glanced over at my ex-wife, I knew my Creole princess wasn't happy. Damn, she's beautiful when she's jealous. "We're going to Aunt Marie's house to swim." "Oh yeah?" I replied, smiling. "Maybe I can join you after I get off work. Mama said you and she would go swimming after we were in bed, but don't see how. She didn't bring a swimming suit." I grinned. "Well, maybe she can borrow one from Aunt Marie." Both kids squealed. "Uncle TJ, both Mama and you could fit into Aunt Marie's swimsuit." "Well, that would be interesting," I said, grinning. Both kids squealed again. "Why don't you and little Sitting Bull here go ask Uncle Maury for one of his special strawberry slushes? My treat." Both kids cheered, and Gabe came out of character long enough to pump his fist in victory. I looked back over at Connie and saw the defeated look in her eyes. We both had our answer. "I really screwed us up bad, didn't I, Jake?" she whispered. "Connie, if you ever grow a soul, let my daughter know her daddy loves her. He just couldn't jump through all the hoops and relive the hell her mama wanted to put him through again." He watched her pale as she dropped her head. "One piece of advice, though. Tell her the truth about you and Brad, and about me. If you don't, she'll find out when she's older, and she'll hate you, even more than I do." With that, I walked over to the bar, knowing I'd never see my little girl again, at least not until she was grown. It hurt, but the last 16 months had gotten my heart used to it. When I got there, Josie wrapped her long arms around my neck and stared into my eyes. I could see the dark flashes dancing dangerously in her eyes. "Is that her?" she whispered. I nodded. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I am now." "Good," she said, giving me a thin smile. For a minute there, I thought I was going to have to go over there and kill the bitch. I smiled. That thought did cross my mind. And what about this thought? Her soft lips melted into mine as our tongues danced. Her body molded to perfectly fit mine, and the intense warmth of her passion threatened to make my jeans feel very confining. With a gasp, we broke our lover's embrace. I saw her eyes flash at something over my shoulder, and then a contented look formed on her stark, pretty face. "And what was that for?" I gasped. "Not that I'm complaining." "Just reminding you, lover," she said calmly, but I could see the evil little thoughts dancing in her eyes. "And making a statement to anyone watching, you're mine." "Did you make your point?" I asked. Josie smiled maliciously. "Well, your ex-wife left in tears, but that blonde bimbo, Stacy?" "Lacey," I replied. "I wonder what she'll look like when I shave her head." I choked back a laugh. She peered deep into my eyes. "And if you use the word scalped, our midnight skinny dip will end with a cold shower for you, Buster." I smiled at her as I realized I'd really moved on. I was finally ready to dance again. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.